All right, welcome everyone to our first community conversation for quite a while. Today we're going to be focusing on the transits and what do the transits mean for you. And I'm here to really answer questions that you have or discuss things that you're interested in or things you've been confused by or whatever that might be. So I wanted to just start really briefly with a couple of comments about my experience with the transits and why I think they're important. And I do want to invite you to put your questions in the chat or things that you want to talk about, things that you're, interested in, and I'll get to those in just a couple of minutes. I first started doing transit reports 6 years ago. Yeah, it was about 2020, I think, 2021 maybe. And I did transit reports that were focused on the movement of the sun and the earth for 4 years. And I would sometimes talk about other planets, but the way I was originally trained to do transit reports was to follow the movement of the sun and the earth. And what I discovered, which I kind of knew, but then I really got, which is that the sun and the earth move through more or less the same gates at the same time every year. And also, the sun and the moon are always in the same relationship with each other. So it's actually quite different than astrology. The closest thing that it's like in astrology is just following the sun around the astrological wheel as we follow the sun over the year, right? And so it makes sense that the sun in human design would also do something similar, right? So especially since our year is based on our relationship to going around the sun. But what I became really aware of was that um, the astrology that we have been in for the last few years in particular started to get really, really strong and interesting. And I got really kind of pulled into a larger astrological perspective when Pluto went into Aquarius. And Pluto being our slowest moving planet, went into Aquarius and then retrograded back into Capricorn and then moved fully into Aquarius about 18 months ago. But had moved in January of that same year. So I got very interested in what was going on in with Pluto going into Aquarius, and I realized that this was such a huge transit. And then I started getting really interested in what was going on with the outer planets and really all the planets. And over time, I started to do my transit reports that were really focusing a lot more on what the outer planets were doing because the outer planets stay in a gate, just like they stay in a sign, for much longer than the inner solar system planets do, and certainly that the Earth does, and the Sun do, because the Earth and the Sun are in a gate for about 5 to 6 days, so it's pretty short, right? Because if you think about it, it's 64 gates, 365 days, right? So it's about 5 to 6 days. So I just started getting really interested in what was going on with the outer planets, and the astrology has only gotten more extreme since I did that. And so it's just kind of proven to me, oh my goodness, this is something that's really important and enriching and informative. And calming, actually, calming and inspiring. And so that's why I started moving my transit reports to be focusing more and more about what's happening with us astrologically, but then bringing in a human design lens to do that. And so now I really focus a lot on the moons, the equinoxes and the solstices, which are really, when you kind of go into the wisdom of the ancients, these were what the ancient people followed, right? They didn't have the kind of calendar that we have. The kind of calendar that we have is actually relatively new. It's only a few hundred years old. We had the Gregorian calendar, we had the Julian calendar, we now have the Julian calendar. It's all made up by people. And it's not even 100% accurate, right? Which is why we have to have a leap year every year. So that's really a human construction that's been laid down on top of the astronomical as well as astrological cycles that fall through the solstices and the equinoxes, which are always considered major portals, and then the moons also, both the new moon and the full moon. So I started going back really to the ancient knowledge, and also because the moons and the equinoxes and the solstices are pretty much because they're solar cycles, right? They're part of the solar cycle, the cycle of the sun. They pretty much happen in the same date every year, just like the sun does, right? So and they also are all in the gates on the G center. So they're all love gates, right? Isn't that cool? I love that. They all enter a gate in the vessel of love, the incarnation cross of the vessel of love. And so to me, that was also really exciting. I was like, wow, isn't that cool that these portals that happen, quarterly, that are really the initiation of the new season. And we even colloquially think of the equinoxes and the solstices as beginning the new seasons. And it doesn't fit with the regular 12-month calendar that we have, right? Because it's not like that. So it's interesting to me, and it can be something for you to look at because I think part of one of the big things that is a part of really moving into this more organic timeline of Earth's development and moving towards the new Earth that we really want to bring into being, that is a world that works for everyone, right? Where we don't have the kind of hierarchies and inequities and toxins and extraction and all of that that's killing our planet and killing our people as well. And so we want to move in another direction and aligning ourselves with the natural cycles, right? Which, like I said, are astronomical as well as astrological. Like we give astrological meaning to them, but they are something that is real, right? It's actually happening. It's not something that human beings just made up. And when we align with that, we get more in touch with what's going on with the earth, how the moon is impacting us. Because after all, we're 70% more or less water, and the moon affects all water on the planet, right? We know that from the tides, but we sort of forget it that it's actually doing that to us as well. Like we're being affected by the moon cycles. And so it helps us to get more in touch with a kind of natural cyclical experience as opposed to an imposed human one. And this is what the ancients all over the world were way more attuned to, which is why we find ancient monuments that are often connected to the solstices or the equinoxes, or in Egypt, it's connected to landscape because the galactic history of Egypt is that it was settled by beings from Sirius. And so the all of the Egyptian stuff points to the star Sirius, which is our companion star. So there was a completely different kind of knowledge and wisdom and understanding that we've gotten disconnected from. But I feel when we can connect with the moon cycles and the solar cycles of the seasons, the equinoxes and the solstices, it helps us get in touch with something that is more fundamental to who we are as human beings, more fundamental as earth beings, right? Living here on this beautiful planet, and also as cosmic beings, because we're part of the solar system, right? We are literally made from stardust. And so we are part of that. And our technology and our conditioning separates us from this really fundamental experience of who we are. And so that's why I've gotten really focused on astrology. And I do think that human design brings in a very interesting layer because astrology is largely focused on the when, right? It's the when. It's like, when is that going to happen? And it's like, on this date, what is happening, right? So it's largely focused on the when, but then it's also focused on the sacred geometry of how are the planets, what are the angles between the planets from the human experience on Earth. Right, because planets don't actually, for example, turn around and go back. They don't do that. They're still going in their orbit, but from our perspective, right, they go retrograde. So it's all about our ability to look at that. But The human design mandala, right, overlays on top of the astrological wheel, and but it slices it differently. It tells a different story, and it has 64 gates, all of which have their own qualities. And then, of course, all the planets and the Earth and the Sun are moving through those gates. And the gates are a bit more like the what. So in astrology, we look at like really the whole sign. And so right now we're in Cancer season, right? So it's a whole month that the sun is going to be in the sign of Cancer. And so while there are, and we can get more clear or more smaller definitions based on the degree of the sign, the Sabian symbols. If you've heard of those, every once in a while I talk about them. They are related to every single degree of the zodiac. Okay, so that's 306, that's a lot of ones, 360 of them. So it goes even smaller to a what. But like, for example, I just released a transit report this morning, which is about the new moon that's happening in Cancer on the 14th, and it's happening in the gate 62. Well, now the gate 62 is called details or preparation. Um, and it has its own story to tell. And that is not evident or visible from an astrological point of view. And it helps us to understand a different way of interpreting what's going on with the new moon. So that's what I've started to do is to really, excuse me, is really bring in the gates together with the moons and with the solstices and the equinoxes because it just gives us a different view of what's going on. And I have found it like really interesting and helpful. I do still really pay attention to what astrologers are saying about the astrology because I am not an astrologer. I mean, I'm studying it to a degree, but I've never like really taken a course and done a deep dive. I've had a bunch of readings and I've looked at it a lot, but I don't really consider myself like an astrologer. So I follow astrologers because astrology, like human design, is just a huge study, right? Um, so that's what I've been doing, and I think it's really enriched my understanding of what the astrologers say because, like I said, it brings in another lens. Like another example that I'll just mention here, and then for those of you who came on later, please, if you have questions or things topics that you want to suggest that we chat about, please put some things in the chat. Okay, so that you can start thinking about what it is that why you came. What do you want to talk about? But there's another example that I'm going to do a video for next week, which I think is really a big deal, which is that Jupiter, right, who is the biggest planet in the solar system, right, massive planet, huge, beneficent, generally energy, right, expands everything. Ruler of Sagittarius, is it just moved into Leo at the end of June, on June 30th. And so Leo is, fire, the lion, sovereignty. It's creative, it's fun. It's very lively, very different than Cancer, which is what we're in right now. And so that gives one sense of flavor to the transit of Jupiter in Leo, which is going to go on for a whole year. But Jupiter is going to move into the gate 31 next week. And the gate 31 is the leadership gate of collective circuitry in human design. And Leo is generally considered a leadership gate as well as sovereign gate, a leadership gate. And he's going to move into that gate of the New World Leader, what I like to call the New Earth Leader. And it used to be called just leadership. Sometimes it's been called democratic leadership, but I like to call it the New Earth Leader. And like I said, it's that leadership expression of the collective circuit. Every one of the main circuits has a leadership gate. And so Jupiter is going to move into that. And I feel like that transit, it's only going to be about 5 or 6 days long because, oh, actually, that's not true because Jupiter stays longer. I think actually there for about 3 weeks, right? is we have an opportunity to really lean into what could New Earth leadership feel like? What could be my role in New Earth leadership? Right. And it doesn't mean you have to run for a public office or you have to, start an organization. I mean, unless you want to, but it's an invitation to us to, move out of any kind of passivity that we've had, or victim consciousness that we've had, or kind of feeling paralyzed by all the things that are going on in the outer world, right? And to move out of any, outrage that we have, or anger that we have, or, kind of attacking kind of energy, which is very alive on the planet right now. And to move into a different state of being and kind of just let all of that go and use our imaginative and intuitive and creative abilities to bring into being new forms of leadership. So I think this is really exciting. And in a way, this will go on during the whole Jupiter in Leo transit because it'll continue to have that kind of quality of Leo, but it's only going to be this one period of time where it's in the gate 31. So that's an example of why I look at the human design transits, because I feel like it gives us like a super lens into what's happening for us astrologically. Okay. So that's really what I wanted to start out with us for today. So I'm going to unpin myself. I'm going to invite you, if you're in a space where you can, to come on camera if you want to. And I'm just going to look and see what's here in the chat. But let's see. Okay. So no questions in the chat yet. All right. So I would love to hear, yes, Nancy, I would love to hear, what do you guys want to talk about today? Yeah,
Do
Nancy.
I have two questions, but that I did put that question in there. Are you familiar with the sidereal zodiac?
I don't follow it, but I am familiar with it.
You're
I
familiar.
know what
Okay,
it is.
that's okay. And
It to
when you,
me, it's like it's almost like another system because it's based in Ayurveda. And so it really has a very, the tropical is much more based in Western culture, and the other is way based in Indian culture and Ayurveda. And so it's really a whole other system. It has, I mean, I have a friend in one of my women's circles who does that kind of astrology. And like when I hear her talk about it, it's like, wow, that is really different. So for me, it would mean like really learning a whole nother system. So I
yeah,
don't know.
but the transits are not different.
They are. Well, they are in terms of
Well,
where they land.
okay, I don't want
They
to
don't land
argue
in the same
about it, but
sign. They don't land in the same gate. They're not aligned.
okay, I'll have to clarify that. But anyway, I guess the reason I'm asking is because well, I'm studying that right now, but that's beside the point. I learned about human design a couple years ago, and it totally changed. It was one of those things that really changes your life because I'm a reflector and I was always trying to make things happen. And so it's been, profound for me. But I kind of set it by the wayside. Not that I stopped being recognizing that things have to come to me and I can't go running out there and getting them. But so that was the major thing. But I'm trying to, and I have a chart. I mean, I have a notebook. I've gone through all of the dates and I have them all marked on here. And I don't know what each one of them means completely yet. But I don't know how to find out which gate we're in right now. And even though I have an ephemeris, I don't know how to read it, I guess, because it
Oh,
doesn't
okay.
it doesn't it doesn't
So
have the
you have this.
gates.
So you have this one.
Yeah.
You have this one. Okay. So I'm just wondering. Let me. Do other people have ephemeris? Do you guys know what this is? Let me just even say what it is so people know what we're talking about. Can you just put in the chat like a one if you know what an ephemeris is? and a 2 if you don't, because I don't want to go and talk about this if you guys don't even know. Okay, so Aluna doesn't know. None of you know. Um,
Because you're talking about the transits, and I think that's really important.
yeah.
Yeah.
Not okay. So some of you do, some of you don't. So this is an ephemeris. Let me just pin myself so yeah, I think you'll be able to see it better. Um, okay. So this is an ephemeris, and it goes from 2026 to 2050. I ran out of the one I had before. And inside, let me see if I can, you know what? What do I have? Let me hold on just one second, you guys. I think I might have a ephemeris. Oh, not that one. I'm just looking for one that's actually yeah, okay, good. This will make it easier for you to see. Okay, can you all see that? Everybody can see that? Okay, I don't know why it just got smaller. There we go. Okay, so this is what a page of the ephemeris looks like. And across the top are the planetary symbols. So we've got the sun, the earth, the moon, the north node, the south node, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Pluto. So, except for the earth, they are in order moving out from the sun. Okay. And it's good to learn the planetary symbols because they show up all over the place and it just makes your life a lot easier when you do that. Okay. And then and then in the first column is the day of the month. So here we've got April 2025, and here's the day of the month. Okay. And then here is the sun, and it's in the gate 21. And it's always in that gate. It's actually my sun gate because my birthday is March 31st. So my sun is always is in the 21 and my earth is in the 48. And so this actually transit is my birth transit. So these are the movements of the sun and the earth. And remember that the sun and the earth always move around the mandala in opposite each other. Then we've got the moon. The moon moves rapidly. You can see it moves 2 or 3 times a day. And then we've got the north node, the south node, and here we've got Mercury, right?
So
Um,
those are the gates. I'm sorry to
these are the
interrupt you, but
gates. Yeah, it's all
oh,
gates.
I thought
It's
they
all
were
gates.
like degrees of where they were.
It's not astrological, it's human design. Human
Okay,
design does not
perfect.
deal with degrees.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
It's gates and lines. Gates and lines. So, for example, here, can I make that even bigger? Yeah. For here, right, we've got 36.5. That's the gate 36 in line 5. So we never have degrees or minutes, which are astrological. What we have is gates and lines. Okay. And then there's little things like when there's a little like this little triangle here, that means that it's changing gate. And then here, that means it's going direct. So yeah, so Venus was retrograde and then goes direct on this day. And you can see up here if it's retrograde, R's mean it's retrograde, D's mean it's direct. So those are really the main things. It's not any more complicated than that. Does anybody have a question about this? Is that clear? Everybody? Anybody have a question? Just unmute yourself and ask it if you do. Okay. Um, Let me just show you guys something else to make sure that you understand kind of from a, actually, I want to show you this other one. Okay, so this is the human design mandala. And it gets represented in slightly different ways, but all the information is always the same. And so if you were to lay, you could lay the astrological wheel on top of it, but they're not aligned. So for example, we've got here Capricorn, but you can see the gate 60 straddles Capricorn and Aquarius. And we actually just had that with the gate 56. We were in Cancer season, right? And Jupiter was in Cancer, and was in the gate 56, the divine storyteller, and then moved into Leo, but didn't change gate yet. So Jupiter's going to change gate when it's in a little bit more into Leo. So this is one of the ways that they do not align exactly, um, which is always kind of interesting. So just so you guys know what's on the mandala, because a lot of times people don't know what kind of really what it is. It's the same information that you have when you have a printout of your body graph chart. It's just represented differently. So there are 4 quarters of the year, and so it divides it into the quarters of the year, and each one has a different quality. And it does not line up with the equinoxes and the solstices. The human design year always starts when the sun moves into the gate 41. That's when it starts. Okay. But you can see it doesn't align even with Aquarius, and it doesn't even align with the beginning of the quarter of the year. Um, and so you can look at the quarters of the year that way. And sometimes that's helpful if you want to see, well, what are the gates in this particular month, right? And then obviously here's the astrological signs. Inside of that are the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching, which align with the gates. And then here's the number of the gates. Now, here is where you can see the line. Okay, so this Earth, right, this is the symbol for the Earth, is in gate 13, line 6. So there's always 6 little marks, uh, divisions inside of every single gate because every hexagram has 6 lines. And you can see the 6 lines right here. Each one of these has 6 lines. And so this corresponds to where it is in the hexagram and how far it's gone through the gate. And we get these color here when so the Earth is in the gate 13, which is on the G center, which is right here. And in this chart, the G center is defined. It's colored in. It's yellow, just its traditional color. And that means that this particular pi mark is going to be colored in. But you can see, for example, where's another? Well, we've got Chiron here. We've got Chiron in the 61, which it does not create definition in the chart. But the head isn't defined anyway. So that because the head isn't defined, these are not colored in. So that's kind of how it works. But you can see for over here, oh, this person has a big assignment. The 28 Saturn and is there twice, and Dark Moon Lilith are all lighting up the gate 28, which is right down here on the spleen center. So that's how definition is created. Definition is created when a planet or multiple planets fall in a gate once or more than once. Typically, if a planet is in a gate more than once, it's either Pluto, Neptune, or Uranus because they stay in gates for a long time. Okay. So I hope that was helpful. Was that helpful to you guys to kind of walk through that? Just kind of again see it. Yeah. Um, yeah, good. Any question about that? About the mandala or anything? Okay. So I think Aluna has a question. The astrological nodes changed the end of July per astrology, but I thought I heard you say that they changed last May per human design. Um, well, just know that human design and the astrological signs are not aligned. So the nodes changed gates in May, and they're actually about to change gates again on the uh on the 25th of July. They're going to move gates. And then they don't change, I don't think they change signs. It's right around the same time though. I don't know what day it is that they change sign, but it's right around the same time. But in the earlier one, it wasn't because in astrology, the nodes stay in a sign, well, in two signs because they're always opposite. That the nodes are the other, they're not celestial bodies. They're the place where the elliptical of the Earth and the moon cross. And so they're a place in space, and they're how we get eclipses because the sun and the sun and the Earth have a different relationship during an eclipse, right? One moves in front of the other. And so that is what creates an eclipse, and those are always connected to the nodes. But the nodes are the only other part of the chart that is always opposite on the mandala or on the astrological wheel. Nothing else operates that way. Okay. And in astrology, they don't even recognize that the sun and the earth does. That's a completely human design thing. So, okay, so that's why, Aluna, they don't, maybe what I just explained would answered your question. You can let me know if you have another question related to that. But maybe the way I just described it already did that. Um, okay, okay. So what else do you guys want to talk about? What's on your minds? How are you feeling about the transits?
I have a question. You said something about, I forget what you said. They're our companion star.
Hmm.
Who?
Serious.
And Sirius and what does that mean?
Well, I don't think that scientists like astronomers have decided that this is true. But when you go into galactic history and you go into the more metaphysical understanding of our galaxy, there is and also astrological. What am I trying to say? In astrology, there is an understanding that Sirius is a companion star, and that we rotate around each other around the galactic center. And there's a theory that we have a companion star, that we're actually a binary star system, not a unitary star system. But I don't think that's been proven astronomically. I don't think there's an agreement on that. I was actually just listening to Stefan Burns, who's really good at helping us understand a lot of these things, and he was just saying that it hadn't been proven yet. So I will take his word for it because he's knows a lot about stuff. But yeah, yeah, and that kind of thing. Like if you go into things like learning about Lionsgate, right? Lionsgate, which is 8/8, but there's a bigger portal. It's about 10 days long. And it has to do with an alignment between the Earth, the Sun, Sirius, but also Orion and Lyra. And so it's a galactic configuration. And we're starting now to learn more and more about our galactic history, that we're actually not alone in the universe. There are many other beings in in the galaxy, right? And that we've actually been in contact with them a lot over the years. There's been a lot of interaction. So there's a lot more we can go into that. But just to say, um, that's kind of what I think of as the spiritual metaphysical news is for us to be learning more about our galactic history. Okay, Jade, it looks like you have a question. Where do you access the HD ephemeris? What's your process for scanning through it and pulling out what's notable? I know you mentioned paying more attention to outer planets and nodes. Okay. Um, this is from Zen Human Design. You can just find them online and you can just buy one. I, um, I'm kind of old school. I like a book. I like a book. I also find it easier to flip through and see things in the book than trying to move through things in Genetic Matrix. So I have a professional account with Genetic Matrix. If you ever want to know what is happening with the transit for today, they always have the chart for it on their homepage. So if you just go to geneticmatrix.com, they always are showing the current transit. So they do it every day. And I think you can have a free account with Genetic Matrix and run a transit chart. There's also an app that you can get, which I think is just called the Human Design app. And it will, I had it for a while. Again, I don't really like apps doing that work for me. But I'm that way. I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to these things, you know. Um, and so, but for some people, it's really helpful because it's very quick. You can just once you put in your birth information, it'll have your chart, and then you can pull up the transit for the day, and it'll put them together. And so it'll just give you an instant, this is how this transit is influencing you, but it doesn't tell you what it means, right? So, but in terms of when I'm looking at this, so I have looked at different things at different times, Jade, obviously, because before I was looking more at the sun and the earth, right? But then so now what I look for is when is an outer planet changing sign? When is an outer planet going retrograde and when does it go direct? And then I'll look at what sign it's in. Because the movement of the outer planets is kind of considered, they're called generational planets because they stay in a sign long enough to really kind of impact all of us, right? Regardless of what your own astrology or your own human design is. It's like Pluto is going to be in Aquarius for 20 years, right? Stays in a sign for 20 years, 19, 20 years, right? That's a big impact um, for us, right? Everybody is going to be experiencing Pluto in Aquarius, and Pluto is going to stay in the gate 41 for 4 years. That's a long time, right? Obviously, it's the farthest out planet that we know of right now. So, although Eris is coming in, Eris is like this asteroid. She's way out there. But anyway, so that's what I look at. And then I look at, are there times where the planets are in the same gate? So in astrology, you would call that the planets being conjunct, right? And I think it would map over to about a 5-degree orb. Do you guys know when I say an orb, what that means? It means they're within 3 degrees of each other or 5 degrees of each other, right? And so, like, for example, when I was looking at Jupiter going through the gate 62, because I was like, my goodness, Neptune has been in the gate 17 for a while. And Neptune's retrograde in the 17, and it's actually a stationary direct, so it's hanging out there for a while, making the 17 really strong. But since May, we've had four different planets, three planets, and now we just have the sun and the earth at this moon that's happening next week are in the gate 62, and that's creating this complete channel of the 1762. And I was like, well, that's interesting. So we've had this whole cycle of that channel being redefined over and over again since May. And at one point, Venus came in, and Venus is a fast moving planet, right? Venus is only in how long is she generally in a gate? Let me just see here. Venus is like 4 days, if even for 1, 2, like 4 days. Okay. Um, Fast. And so maybe a little bit longer because Mercury is like 5 days. So Venus is probably a little bit, yeah, no, she's a little bit longer, maybe 6 days. But anyway, it's fast, right? Compared to Jupiter, who was there for a month. But while Jupiter was there, right, Venus speeding along comes in and says, "Hi, Jupiter, I'm here too." And then she moves on, and Jupiter's still there. But Jupiter eventually moved on. And then Mercury joined in June. And I was like, oh, and then Mercury's in the gate 62 for a month, which is crazy. Mercury's usually in a gate for like 5 days. It's like usually even faster than Venus, right? But it's like, because what happened is it went into the 62, slowed down, stationed, retrograde, turned around, came back through the 62, right? And then turned around again and it's going forward, right? And it's about to exit the 62, I think tomorrow, but has been there for like a month, right? Which is so when I see things like that, Jade, I go, what? That is interesting. What is going on? What is the impact of us having this whole channel lit up over and over again? And then the crescendo is this new moon with the sun and the moon there, right? It's like it's going to supercharge what was there. And so then that inspires me to dig into what do I feel like is going on with the energy of this channel, the two gates, and then how does that relate to what I see happening in the world? And then that's how I create my interpretation. So these two gates, they're in the logic circuit. 17 is anticipation or opinions in traditional human design, just kind of its, I would call it a shadow expression. But anticipation and then details and preparation. So what are you anticipating and are you preparing for it? Right. But like every single aspect of the chart, astrological chart, human design chart, can be experienced and expressed in different ways. So the question is, are you, and this is what I said in the transit report, are you anticipating, you know, Armageddon? Are you anticipating the complete breakdown of society and what that might mean for you? You know, are you looking at like the ecosystems of the planet falling apart? Is that what you're attending to? And then are you preparing for that? Or are you looking for that organic timeline that I mentioned earlier, right? The world that works for everyone. And yes, it's going to be kind of rough getting there for sure. But is that what you're giving your attention to? Is that what you're anticipating? Is that what you're preparing for? And the other thing about this is that the 17 and particularly the channel can become argumentative because remember that the ajna a defined ajna tends to think that it's right. It's certain, right? As a certainty, even though it may not be right at all. And that's a challenge for people with defined ajnas. They really need to learn that piece because they can fall into the need to be right. And then they can fall into convincing and being dogmatic and blah, 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 right? So that's an example of something that I just, because I was paying attention to what I was seeing happening, and then I went, oh, I've seen this channel before. I've seen this channel a bunch. And then I went back and looked at the dates and looked at the planets and kind of put it all together. Um, yeah. Does that answer your question, Jay? Let me know if you have a follow-up. You're also well, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just so interested in human design, but also so new to it. Um, and I don't know anything about any of the different channels and what they mean right now. So it just sounds like I should find resources that really dig into what those different channels are, and then I can maybe start to have my own take on things.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer, and Nana knows, Nana's been with me for a while. She's in our sovereign sisterhood. That I'm a big advocate for people making human design their own. And so, what I would suggest for any of you who are newer to human design is, yeah, get yourself some resources. I personally, Karen Curry Parker was my human design teacher. She created Quantum Human Design. This is a reference book. Again, I'm kind of nerdy, so I can actually sit down and read a book like this, but most people won't. But it's great. You can go and find out some about your gates, channels, but it's pretty schematic. Okay, there's not a lot of explanation about any of it. For gates, um, I really like this book. Um, uh, they're just calling it. I'm like, who's the author? Um, but it's hd.os. Uh, Human Design Oracle System Inner Guidebook, The Gates to Know Yourself, Practical Guide to Understand the Depth of Your Unique Human Design. And she doesn't, they kind of, they take off from the traditional and quantum. I think, we are starting to see a expansion of interpretations Which I think makes sense because human design is a consciousness, and so it's an evolving system, just like we are. So those are a couple of things, Jade. I would say, I know I'm putting together a human design transit, understanding human design transits program right now. Nana did a version of that with me last year. We did for our Sovereign Sisterhood. We did that in about a 4 month period. And so I'm pulling it together to create something for people who can just get the program if they want. Um, and um, and part of that is looking at what is it that you feel you need in order to be able to understand the transit. So that is something I would love to hear from you. So Jade, you just told me, you were like, I don't know what the channels are. I don't know what the channels mean. And Nancy, you were like, I'm just learning the gates, right? So that's pretty basic, right? We need to know at least some of the qualities of the gates and the channels, right? And then also centers, right? So these are kind of the fundamental data of human design, if you will. And when I teach people human design, I do say it's important for you to learn some of the data initially. You don't have to try to learn it all at once because, like I say, it's trying to eat the whole buffet in one meal. It's like you'll just get indigestion and get frustrated. And sometimes people just walk away because they're like, they're trying, they get inspired and then they try to eat all the information. You cannot absorb all of it that fast. You just can't. So stop trying. I mean, it's literally not possible. You could, if you were one of those people who knew how to, who have a photographic memory, you could memorize all the names, but that wouldn't necessarily tell you what the qualities of the energy are, you know? Yeah. Um, I do have a tool that will be in the new program, which is where we went back through 4 years of my transit reports, where I was really focusing on the sun and the earth, and they all have much deeper explanations of the gates in that tool. And so that's one thing that I put together to try to help people find really more in depth. Or like, for example, like with the 62 and the 17 in the thing I released this morning, I talked about those two and the channel the whole time. So that's like 28 minutes, really just focusing on those. So that's a way too, is to kind of follow what I do and know, say, oh, okay, this is kind of what the 17 is like, and this is kind of what the 62 is like. And, so it won't be fast, but you'll get a deeper understanding that way. So that's one way to do it. Uh, and I will just say that in general, not 100% of the time, but in general, the traditional human design names tend to be a little more dark, negative. And they tend to be a little bit more about the not self. And that's what Karen always said because she worked with Ra for a long time. And she said he created the language of the not self. And he meant to create the language of the awakened self, but he never did. And so in her view, that's what quantum human design is the language of the awakened self. And always use both because I think it's really important for us to know what the shadow and disempowered aspect of the gates are too. Because a lot of times, like I just did a reading for a woman who's in her 70s a few days ago, and she has her conscious earth is in the gate 53, which is the gate of starting things. And before I even mentioned that to her, the first thing she said to me is that I have trouble procrastinating. And so I was like, I wonder what's going on with her gate 53. And then I said, oh, she's got the gate 53. Even her earth is there. So it's a major alignment for her. But she's experiencing the disempowered aspect of the gate 53, which is procrastination. Can't get started. So that's why it's good to have a perspective on things, or like the gate 63, which is the beginning of the logic circuit, right? It's doubt or curiosity, right? And you can kind of flip between doubt or curiosity. And one is really disempowering and one is really enlivening. So, okay, I hope that helped. Okay, so how do I reconcile the impact of a planet with a specific gate impact? So let's imagine what's happening when a planet is in a gate. Okay. So let's say, so the mandala is on here. Let's say that this is like the Earth, right? The neutrino stream is coming down, right? And then the energy from all of the different planets are going through the mandala onto the Earth. So the energy of the planet, right, is still the energy of the planet. And then it's lighting up the energy of the gates. So just to go back to an example I gave earlier, Jupiter moving into the gate 31, right, is lighting up. So Jupiter, big planet, beneficent, generally speaking, um, generous, um, uh, visionary, teacher. Jupiter's considered a teacher energy. And that energy is then lighting up the gate of new Earth leadership, right? And Jupiter's going to expand whatever's happening in that gate. It's going to make it bigger. Now, the thing is Jupiter has a shadow too, which is excess, right? This is where we get, like eating too much and drinking too much and partying too much, just too much of a good time, right? That's the shadow of Jupiter, right? Um, and it can fall into addiction because it's just more and more and more, right? But it's never satisfied. So the shadow really of the gate 31 is like dictatorship, right? Totalitarianism, because it's the gate, it's the collective leadership gate. And so when Jupiter is there, Jupiter can potentially expand the energy of totalitarianism, but it can also expand the energy of the new Earth leader. And it's up to every one of us about how we choose to experience that energy. Because we always are a choice about how we're going to experience it ourselves. And I think we can see, even though Jupiter hasn't got to the 31 yet, we can see that that kind of thing is happening, right? The extremes are getting stronger, right? They're diverging and they're getting stronger and stronger. So yeah, there's going to be some things like we had Mars conjunct Uranus in Gemini. A lot of people were predicting it's very sparky, right? That fireworks, like, and that happened on the 4th of July in the United States, right? And so a lot of people were predicting that we could have, more war breakout, right? Sudden change, big God of War. Well, it didn't happen that day. But that's an example of how that energy can operate. Does that answer your question, Nancy? So you're really you're thinking about, like, if you think of Jupiter as like this kind of rotund, large, generous, wealthy, kind, being who then walks into this gate, which is all about leadership, and goes, "Oh, what's going on in here? Okay. Oh, okay. Oh, that's going on in there. Oh, okay. Well, I guess that can happen. All right. If they want to experience that. Oh, but let's see if we want to get some more energy. Oh, this is beautiful. Let's expand this. Right. Really, all the planets are like, they're gods, right? They're characters. I really
That's
like it.
great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
And it's almost like the gate is like a room they walk into or a house they walk into. And what's in there? Yeah.
Thanks.
It's good to make this stuff less esoteric. You know what I mean? Because when it's really esoteric, it just stays right up here, right? But as soon as we can imagine, embodying Jupiter, and you can go, oh, what would it be like to be Jupiter? If I were to embody that, what would it feel like, right? We actually did a exercise I have an incarnation cross program also. And we did that with our sun and our earth, and we looked at them in their different gates and how did the sun act when it was in in its conscious gate, and how did it act when it was in its unconscious gate, and how did they talk to each other? Because in astrology, they're actually in a square, right? Which is considered a conflictual energy. So we did a fun role play with that. Yeah. It's kind of like making it real, you know? Because then you can also realize, because so I'm an Aries sun, Mars is my ruling planet. I have the South Node conjunct my sun, along with Mercury in Aries. And so I've got a lot of Mars energy, Martian area energy, right? A lot of warrior energy because South Node in Mars in Aries is like mark of warrior many lifetimes, and I've really worked with my Mars energy. And I'll sometimes be like, whoa, that was kind of Martian. Okay, let me just kind of tone that down. You know? So it's good to know these things about yourself, right? It's like because we have these influences of these different archetypes. Okay. So Jade asks, so when transits complete our hanging gates? Oh, this is a good one. Hanging gates. Is that a good time to plan to do things that would be aided by connected channels? Yes. Yeah. hmm Yeah. Like, so whenever you guys know what a hanging gate is, can you just put a one in the chart in the chat if you know what it is? Because some of you might not know. Oh, most of you know. Okay. So a hanging gate is basically a gate that where its mate is not defined, right? And sometimes people go, "Oh gosh, there's the center and the gate is sticking off of it, but it doesn't go anywhere, right? It's broken." Sometimes it's broken. Like that's not broken. It just doesn't have its mate. So this is an important thing in a transit when you're a hanging gate, its mate gets defined because then all of a sudden the whole channel is going, right? So like for me, I have the gate. It's not really accurate here because Neptune is already in the 17, but I have the 17, right? So when the 62 keeps coming around, it creates a complete channel for me. And I have an open ajna and an open throat. So it defines both of those centers for me when this channel is defined. That's a big shift in energy for me, right? Gives me a lot more ability to express, right? What I'm anticipating, right? And what I'm preparing for, because that's the energy of that channel. Does that answer your question, Jane? You have a follow-up? Yeah.
I think I just need to
Um,
learn more about, yeah, how to all of it. It's good to know. Well, does it matter, like if it's conscious or unconscious, red or black? Like, do you look at that and think about it differently?
I do, but when you're first learning stuff, that wouldn't be the first thing I would look at, right? The first thing I would look at is really the quality of the gate, what center it's in, what circuit it's in. And so when I talk about the archetypes in human design, I talk about three different expressions. Usually people talk about two, but I wrote a book called, where is it? Feminine Sovereignty, which is really a treatise on power. And I really talk about these three different expressions. So one is the disempowered expression, where we fall into victim consciousness in relationship to whatever that is. Like the woman who has a history of procrastinating, even though she has the gate 31, right, the gate 53, right? She's in the disempowered expression of that gate. The shadow expression is when you try to use the energy of that to control or manipulate things outside yourself, which we've all been trained to do and think nothing of it. And so it helps us become aware of ways that we might, like, so for example, when I was saying Jupiter in the gate 31, and that's a leadership gate, right? Totalitarianism, that would be a shadow expression. Shadow, control, manipulation, coercion. The awakened and empowered expression would be one that is not about that dynamic, right? It's not about the victim perpetrator dynamic, and it's also not about the rescuer. It's about what is the pure energy of that, and how can I be at the highest frequency in my expression of it, my experience and my expression of it. Yeah. Okay, so we're coming up on our end of our time. Um, Okay, so question. Gene Keys has been is do I think Gene Keys is beneficial for understanding the gates and channels? Gene Keys is a different system. So again, all of these systems are different. Now, gene keys grew out of human design, and the activation sequence is the same gates as you find in the incarnation cross, but the interpretations are often very different. And I think that it can be helpful, but it's a really a whole other study. You know what I mean? I mean, what I did with the gene keys is I looked at the activation sequence because it's the incarnation cross. It's the same gates as the incarnation cross. And but he doesn't look, there's so many things he doesn't look at, and there's other things he looks at that aren't in human design. So I know some people find it helpful. Um, it's up to you. I mean, you could go and look at some of it and see. Nana, do you look at gene keys? I think at one point you said you were looking at what is your experience with that?
Yeah, my experience is similar that the expressions are different. They're very much more contemplative in a way because that's him. That's his whole way
That's
of
his
doing
deal.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's his vibe. Um, I do like the programming partner aspect to it sometimes too. But yeah, I think I lean heavier toward probably human design than the gene keys. And I
Yeah.
haven't done their pathing, the pathways.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for me, it's too much in your head, not much lived. For me, I'm more about lived human design and living. That's why I study the transits, uh and as you said earlier, I wanted to comment, doing it slowly, doing like we did it before, doing the sun and earth. If you're new to this, during the sun and earth through the year, you experience every gate. So you get the flavor. If you're tracking it at all, or if you're a journaler at all, you kind of can, over the course of a year, get a little bit experience for their main energy, I think, and can then apply it through the other planets that way if you wanted to. But yeah, that was my take.
Yeah. And Ra once said that it's the way you really learn human design is by following the transits. And especially how you learn the gates. Because when you have a gate that's open and there's a transit, especially a long transit, so outer planet transit is in that gate, you get to lean into and feel the energy of that gate for a significant period of time. And that takes a certain amount of your ability to tune into your own energy field and to know what you're feeling, which a lot of people actually can't do because they're too up here, right? Or even out here. So, yeah. So, let's see. Uh, yeah, the other thing I would say about Gene Keys has they have he did put together these paths, and that's something human design doesn't have. It doesn't have a path. It doesn't have paths. And so there is a benefit in Gene Keys in that way that he's really kind of explored what are the relationship between these different qualities of energy and how do they kind of evolve through a sequence, which is interesting. And I like that he's more contemplative, not necessarily, and I don't think for him contemplation is heady. I think it's very much like how does it feel in my body? How does it show up in my life? And he'll say, take one gene key and live with it for 6 months, you know. And Nana's heard me say, take your conscious sun and live with your conscious sun in your awareness for a month or two. Right. So I really like that part of what Richard Rudd does. And then of course he's mystical. He's a mystic. He's a mystic. And so his stuff is poetic and and most of the writing on human design is not like that at all. I mean, the quantum human design stuff, I mean, I love Karen, she's my teacher, but she's very logical. Her stuff is very logical, right? And it has a completely different kind of feel to it. So I learned the data from Karen, but everything else I learned through my own self exploration and study and also teaching so that I get to know, what does it feel like to you, right? Because it's all a big experiment. Ra always said human design was an experiment, and it's also really evolving. So I would love if any of you, well, let me just ask you, would any of you, no obligation or anything, but would you be interested in a course that actually walked you through how you work with the transits? Can you just put like a 5 in the chat if that's something you would potentially be interested in? So I have a sense of like how much interest there is in that. Because, people do watch my transit reports. But I never know, right? Yeah. So, okay, awesome. Because I've been thinking about pulling it together. I am completing a course on the incarnation cross, which of course is deeply related to the transits because your incarnation cross is the transit when you were born, right? And so it's really important. Okay, good. And is there anything that you would say? So what I've heard so far is what you would like to what you feel like you would need to be able to understand the transits are, of course, you would need to know the data, right? Or you'd need to have access to the data so you could look it up, right? That you could go, okay, this is what this gate means, this is what this center means, this is what like that kind of thing, right? So that's basic data, right? But then interpretation is a whole nother thing. Right. And so, are there other things? I know you did ask some questions like how do you understand the dynamic between the planet and the gate, right? That's absolutely one thing. And then what were some of your other questions? Yeah. You're right. What happens when a transit completes a channel, right? That's another really good thing to know. Um, Right. And what do you pay attention to, right? When you're looking at transits, when does something jump out at you? I guess would be a way to think about that. So those are the three things that I heard. What else? Is there anything else that you're like, oh, I would really, so because I will bring this and put them into the program. So this is your opportunity to say what you want in there. And Nancy, I'll look real fast for that book. You guys go ahead and put that in the chat in the chat. Um, Let me see if I can. Um, yeah, so Nancy, I just put it into Amazon hd.os and it came right up. Um, Let me put it into the chat here. Yeah, so it's right there. You just didn't look for the right thing. Okay, so other questions. Channel explanations. Are the incarnation cross and are you talking about the midheaven? Is this what you're talking about? Right? Um, Not exactly. Not exactly. No. No, you have to go to astrology for that. And neither is your rising sign. Your ascendant isn't in human design either. Okay. Do lines play into transits? They could if you wanted to get that microscope. Um, to me, the number of layers that I already unpack is enough. The one time the line really matters is in your conscious sun and your unconscious sun because those create your profile, right? Those lines modify your sun gates. And so those lines are really important because that's kind of your character in human design. Okay. And there are people, I mean, there are people who are they're more obsessed with data than I am. I'm really more obsessed with interpretation and embodiment. So I don't go to the deeper esoteric stuff in human design. I don't go to the deeper, like super nuanced things because I just think after a while it just starts to be mind candy. It's just like I want to know more information. And I'm like, yeah, but have you lived it yet? Right? Okay, how to interpret having multiple channels and centers defined during transits. Okay. Okay. Well, I would just say because I have been having so much definition because I have a very open chart. Been having so much definition. Just a quick thing I would say is that you take one piece at a time and you interpret one piece and then another piece, and then another piece, and then you go, okay, how does this piece relate to that piece, relates to that piece? So you go from the smallest and build outward, right? So you go from the gate to the channel to the centers, right? And then you would look at that constellation, and then you would look at another one, and then you would go, okay, are those constellations connecting with each other in a different way now or not? Yeah. And that's related to like if you have a single definition or a split or a triple split or quad split definition. Okay, but that's another thing. All right, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up soon. I do want to let you know if you are, curious about this kind of thing, we do talk about this in the Sovereign Sisterhood. We do have a, very active, supportive community. Right now, we're working with emotional wisdom and which is pillar number 2 of feminine sovereignty. And we've been looking at the voices in our head and identifying the different kinds of energies that are kind of constantly in play and how does that work with our emotions. And next month, we're going to look at the emotional solar plexus in depth and how that influences us in relationships. So in the sisterhood, we both work with topics from the feminine sovereignty, but feminine sovereignty is also based in human design. So we talk about a lot of human design stuff as well. So that's something I can send you guys a link in a follow-up email if you want to check it out. But like I said, I'm pulling this transits together and that'll be fun to see. And I'll probably do like a little workshop or something where we could do some live to kind of get us started with it as well. That would go with that. And then we're going to do another community conversation on the 23rd, so 2 weeks from today. And that'll be bring questions you have about your chart. So that'll really be like, I'm not going to do a presentation or anything. It's really going to be, your opportunity to ask a question about your chart or a question about human design in general, and we'll respond to those. Okay, so you will get, since you're registered, you'll get the updates for that as well. And if there's continuing interest, I'll continue to do these because I like to meet all you guys and talk to you guys, see who you are, see your faces, and all of that. Okay. All right. All right. Thank you, Michelle. Michelle says, thank you, Maggie. I liked what you said about the buffet. Didn't observe before that everything in the real buffet. I want to eat everything. Yeah, you have to watch out for that with human design. I mean, it's okay to a degree, but notice if you start to get overwhelmed, right? Or if because what you don't want to do, and I've seen people do this, is that they try to eat the whole buffet really fast, and then they get overwhelmed, and then they walk away and they leave the whole thing. So don't let that happen to you. Okay, don't let that happen to you. If you start to get overwhelmed, just walk away for like a day or two or a week even, but don't leave the whole thing. Just go, wow, I need to digest that for a little bit, right? And trust your own consciousness to digest what you learned, right? And because you know this, right? Sometimes you'll have done something, it'll be like, right? And you let it lie for a little bit and you come back to it and you go, oh, now it's clear, right? Because your consciousness has been digesting it during that time, right? And so you have a different view of it. All right, all right. Well, thanks everybody for being here, and thanks for those of you who are willing to come on camera because I always do like to see you, and I hope I'll see you in a couple of weeks. All right.
Thank you.